Ethan Hayes stood frozen at the doorway of his grandfather's old garage, boots rooted in the cold earth like a soldier holding the line one last time. The morning air carried the scent of rust, engine oil, and a grief too heavy to put into words. In his trembling hand lay a single key, the final thing his grandfather ever gave him. Dust drifted through the air like ghosts of forgotten battles as Ethan reached for the lock, heart hammering like war drums buried by time. Whatever waited inside was never meant for the world to see. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. A pale winter sun hovered low over rural Virginia, its weak light stretching across frost-silvered fields and quiet pine groves. Cold air clung to the wooden porch of the Hayes house, a modest cabin tucked at the end of a gravel road where maple trees bowed like solemn sentries in mourning. Ethan Hayes stood motionless, broad shoulders squared, boots planted firmly as if bracing against a battlefield wind. His olive-green Special Forces jacket still carried faint dust marks from Afghanistan's desert winds, and his jaw, angular and shadowed with a 2-day stubble, tightened against emotion he refused to let surface. His eyes, an intense steel blue, had once surveyed combat zones for threats. Today they searched the silent front yard as if grief itself might ambush him from the trees. The boon he had in his hand, soft from years of service, felt like a relic now, a symbol both of duty fulfilled and a life forever changed. In war, he had held wounded teammates as their breaths faded, yet watching the casket of his grandfather lower into the earth had felt heavier than any battlefield farewell. Loss was different when it touched home soil. Beside him, Rex moved with quiet precision, a 4-year-old German shepherd with thick amber-tipped fur, strong build, and eyes full of intelligent alertness. Once trained for military K-9 missions, Rex bore a faint scar along his flank from shrapnel years ago, yet his loyalty had never wavered. He leaned gently against Ethan's leg, sensing his pain. Rex had been there when Ethan lost comrades overseas, had been there when nightmares clawed through sleep, and was here now, offering the same wordless, unwavering presence. Ethan set his olive-drab rucksack against the porch rail. The wooden cabin smelled of pine sap and memories, his grandfather's old coffee kettle, leather gloves that always sat by the door, the faint trace of pipe tobacco that lingered in winter. He swallowed hard. His grandfather, Colonel Thomas Hayes, tall, upright figure with silver-white hair always meticulously combed, a man who carried discipline in the straight line of his spine and kindness in his weathered brown eyes, was gone. A man whose handshake felt like reassurance, whose voice could command a battalion or soothe a crying child. A leader, a teacher, a quiet storm of dignity. Ethan had learned endurance by watching him split wood even in old age, had learned restraint by hearing him say, "Power doesn't prove strength, patience does." Their bond was iron, two soldiers separated by generations, tied by duty and love. The funeral had been full of old voices, veterans with stooped backs, whispering stories of missions never written into history books. But now, the house was empty except for echoes. Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out the envelope the lawyer had handed him at the burial. His name, Ethan Richard Hayes, written in his grandfather's precise slanted script. He opened it again, though he had already memorized the words. Ethan, understanding correctly is the first duty of a protector, the garage behind the house. The key in your hand opens more than a door. Th. There were no hints, no maps, no instructions. The man who had once led covert operations across continents had left him only one sentence and a cryptic promise. Ethan exhaled slowly, frost trailing from his lips. His mind drifted back to childhood summers spent here, hammering nails beside his grandfather, learning how to tie knots, shining boots before Sunday service. But some memories cut deeper. At 17, standing in this very yard, fists clenched, rage tearing through him as he watched paramedics load his father into an ambulance after a car crash. His father never came home. His grandfather had been the one to steady him, teaching him that grief is not weakness, but proof we loved something worth losing. Honor the fallen by living stronger, he had said. Ethan had carried those words through every deployment, every loss, every battle cry and battlefield silence. But now, staring at the quiet house, he felt something unfamiliar creeping in. Fear, not of danger, but of truth. What had his grandfather guarded? Why this secrecy? Beside him, Rex's ears flicked. A car approached slowly along the gravel road. A dusty green pickup rolled to a stop. Out stepped Sarah Whitmore, the local post office clerk and longtime neighbor. Sarah was in her mid-50s, tall and slender with long gray-streaked hair pulled into a neat ponytail. She had a soft-lined face, gentle hazel eyes, a kind demeanor shaped by years of caring for an ailing husband she lost to cancer. Her voice always held a mix of warmth and melancholy, as if she carried grief like a familiar scarf over her shoulders. "Ethan," she called softly, stepping forward in her wool coat and worn leather boots. "Welcome home, dear." He forced a short nod. "Thank you." She studied him, worry threading her brow. "Your grandfather talked about you every week at the diner, said you carry storms inside but always walk through them." Ethan's throat tightened. He exaggerated. "He never exaggerated about you," she whispered. Sarah reached into her coat. "He left this with me to give you today." She handed him a small brass key, old and cold in the palm. "Said only you should use it." Ethan's pulse thudded like a distant drumline. The garage. Sarah squeezed his hand lightly. "He loved you more than life itself. Remember that." Then with a soft pat on Rex's head, she left. Silence swallowed the yard again. The key weighed heavily in his palm, too light for what it implied, too ancient to be ordinary. He turned toward the backyard. Rex followed, vigilant. Their boots and paws crunched over frost-bitten earth. The garage stood alone beneath towering pines, weather-worn, its metal siding scarred by time. Ethan had never been allowed inside as a child. His grandfather's voice had always been firm. "Some rooms are for soldiers only." Today, that command felt like a summons. Standing before the locked door, Ethan noticed 3 heavy padlocks securing it, military-grade, hardened steel, older models but still formidable. Not something a man uses for tools and lawn equipment. His heartbeat slowed with instinctive combat focus. He slid the key into the first lock. It clicked open with a metallic sigh. Rex lowered his head, ears sharp, tail stiff. Memories flashed. Clearing rooms in Kandahar, breaching doors, the smell of burnt sand and cordite, the heavy awareness that stepping forward could mean meeting the unknown, friend, foe, or ghost. The second lock snapped. Ethan's breath plumed in the cold air. He whispered, more to himself than Rex, "Whatever you hit, old man, I'll face it." The third lock fell away. With one steady inhale, he pulled the door. Hinges groaned like something waking from decades of sleep. Dust drifted in pale shafts of sunlight. The smell hit first. Engine oil, cold steel, aged leather, and a faint trace of gun lubricant older than his birth year. And then, through the dim light, he saw shapes, large draped objects, their outlines hulking and unmistakably military. His pulse kicked hard. "Grandpa," Ethan whispered. Behind him, Rex let out a low growl, half warning, half mourning. Ethan stepped 1 foot inside, then froze. A metallic glint protruded from beneath one of the canvas covers, a symbol stamped on steel, a U.S. military insignia, classified division, something no civilian should possess, something even soldiers rarely saw. Ethan's breath caught, and then another sound, soft, from deeper inside, a shuffle, a presence, someone or something else was in the darkness. For a suspended heartbeat, the garage felt alive, the air thick with dust and a silence so tight it squeezed against his ribs. Ethan stood just inside the threshold, one boot on concrete, one still outside on cold earth, like a soldier caught between worlds, the war he had left behind and a new battlefield disguised as memory. Rex stayed pressed to his calf, body tense, thick fur bristling down his spine. A low growl, soft but razor-taut, rose in the dog's throat. Something else was here. Someone. Ethan's training kicked in before thought did. His breathing slowed, pulse settling into that familiar calm rhythm reserved for ambushes and door breaches. His right hand slid instinctively toward his belt, then stopped. No pistol. He had buried his grandfather today. He had not expected danger at home. The shape shifted again, just the faintest rustle behind a dusty workbench. Ethan moved silently, controlled, his long, sturdy frame fluid like he was back in urban combat. His steps were measured, boots whispering against concrete instead of marching. Slowly, a head lifted from behind a pile of boxes. A man, young, mid-20s at most, muddy blonde hair, neckbeard short and uneven like he'd cut it himself with dull scissors, pale skin with a scatter of freckles, and wide, nervous eyes behind smudged glasses. His shoulders were narrow, sweater stretched and stained with oil, jeans frayed at the knees. His entire posture screamed someone used to shrinking rather than standing tall. The stranger raised his hands instantly, palms shaking. "Oh God, don't shoot! I'm not a threat." His voice trembled like someone who had spent more time with books than fists. Rex barked once, sharp, controlled, chest puffed. Ethan didn't move. "Name," he said, calm, level, deadly still. The stranger swallowed. "Nathan Ellis." He blinked behind his glasses, blinking hard as though the lights hurt him. I didn't mean to break in. Please don't call anyone. You broke into my grandfather's garage." Ethan's voice held no anger, just steel truth. Nathan's breathing hitched. "I didn't break anything. I had a key." Ethan froze at that. Nathan fumbled in his sweater pocket and pulled out a tiny brass key. Identical shape, identical age. Ethan's grip on reality stuttered. "Who gave you that?" Nathan's face flushed with a strange mix of embarrassment and fear. "Colonel Hayes, months ago. He said if anything happened to him, I should watch over what's inside this place." The world paused. A storm of confusion, loyalty, and unease collided inside Ethan's chest. Nathan's eyes darted toward the Jeep, then toward the steel-sealed case and the folders stamped with faded red. Top secret. He lowered his voice, fear replaced by awe. I know what this is." Ethan took a slow step closer. "Explain." Nathan inhaled shakily. "I'm an engineering student at Virginia Tech, or was. I left this semester." His gaze flicked down. Shame shadowed his face. "I don't do well in crowds, or noise, or people. Professor said I had severe social anxiety, maybe more. But machines, codes, transmissions, they make sense." The boy's voice sharpened with sudden clarity, an almost obsessive precision. "Your grandfather came to the university last year. He asked questions about signal ghosting and analog encryption failure points. Everyone thought he was some harmless retired vet tinkering with radios." Nathan's expression darkened, eyes shimmering with something like respect and fear. He wasn't tinkering. He was guarding history's ghost. Ethan looked at the Jeep, the sealed equipment. Phantom echo. Cold crept through his spine. Nathan continued, his voice dropping to whisper. "Colonel Hayes said old wars never stay dead. Signals float forever in the ether. Some shouldn't be heard again." A truck rumbled faintly on the road outside and both men stiffened. Nathan flinched like a hunted animal. Ethan studied him closely. Nathan wasn't dangerous. He was fragile, earnest, and telling the truth. But someone else might have followed him here. He lowered his tone. "Why are you here now?" Nathan's mouth trembled. "I saw the obituary." His voice cracked. "I owed him. He saved me, kept me going when I wanted to disappear. He said purpose keeps a soldier alive. Doesn't matter if the soldier fights with guns or circuits." A beat of silence passed. Pain flickered through Ethan. His grandfather had always found broken souls and believed in them. Soldiers, mechanics, lost boys like Nathan. Ethan forced a slow exhale. "Stand up, slowly." Nathan obeyed, awkward and stiff, like unused to standing under scrutiny. He was tall, almost Ethan's height, but carried himself small, shoulders caved inward, feet angled as if expecting rejection. Ethan spotted an ID clipped inside Nathan's jacket. Nathaniel Ellis, 23, Electrical Systems Research Lab intern. It looked real. Rex relaxed a fraction, ears still high. Ethan nodded once. "If my grandfather trusted you, I'll hear you out." Nathan sagged in relief. Glasses slipping down his nose, then his eyes sharpened again. He pointed to the covered equipment. "Do you know what that is?" "I just found it," Ethan admitted. "I know it matters. It could rewrite military history." Nathan's voice shook with intellect-fueled adrenaline. Phantom Echo wasn't just a listening system. It was an active resonance intelligence array designed to detect transmissions not meant to be heard. Not by radios, not by satellites, by anything. Ethan stared. In English. Nathan met his gaze, breath quickening. It could intercept signals that weren't sent anymore. Signals that already happened. Ethan's jaw clenched. That's impossible. Physics disagrees, Nathan whispered, and so does your grandfather's work. A gust of wind brushed the pine branches outside. The garage felt suddenly smaller, colder. Ethan studied Nathan once more, noticing something new. The boy's eyes were red-ringed, sleepless, like he'd lived nights expecting danger. A soldier without battlefield training, but still living under fire. Ethan understood that world. He had lived in it since he was 19. Before he could speak, Nathan's head jerked toward the open garage door. We can't stay here. Ethan's muscles tightened. Why? Nathan swallowed hard. Your grandfather wasn't the only person who remembered Phantom Echo. His voice trembled, then steadied, almost eerily calm. And when someone tries this hard to bury a ghost, he looked Ethan straight in the eye, fear replaced by grim certainty. There are always people willing to dig it back up. Night crept in slow and heavy, the kind that swallowed sound and blurred the world into soft charcoal edges. The Hayes property lay under a hush, broken only by the sigh of pine branches and the steady breathing of the earth settling into darkness. Inside the garage, a single hanging bulb cast a lonely pool of amber light over metal, dust, and secrets too heavy for the quiet countryside to carry. Ethan sat on an overturned crate beside the military jeep, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was in a battlefield prayer. His shoulders carried the weight of 2 wars now, one fought overseas, one born in the bones of his family. The tension sat deep in him, radiating like the dull ache after a long march. Rex lay half-curled against Ethan's boots, body relaxed but eyes alert, as if he too sensed that tonight was only the beginning of something brewing. Nathan perched awkwardly on a toolbox nearby, long legs tucked tight, hands restless as he toyed with a small ring on his thumb. His nervous energy contrasted Ethan's rigid stillness. Nathan's face looked almost ghost-like under the bulb, pale cheeks stark against the smudge of engine grease on his jaw. His gaze flicked now and then toward the Jeep's sealed components, like an astronomer looking at a hidden star he had spent his life chasing. Silence had grown thick between them after the sedan left earlier, the one delivering Robert Hayes with arrogance sharper than a bayonet. Robert had stormed away after their argument, tires flinging gravel like the punctuation mark of a man who believed money and logic were the only truths, but his presence lingered in the room like smoke from a gunshot. Ethan could still see the coldness in his brother's eyes, hear the superiority in his clipped tone, feel the sting of old wounds that never healed right. Ethan rubbed at the faint scar below his left eye, a thin, pale line carved by flying glass in Kabul years ago. The scar always warmed when tension rose, as if the past returned through the body before the mind remembered. He clenched his jaw, drawing a slow breath, combat breathing, in, 2, out, 4. The habit would never leave him. I think he hates you, Nathan murmured suddenly, voice tentative, as though afraid to disturb the air. Ethan didn't look up. He doesn't hate me. Nathan shifted, pushing his glasses further up his nose. He looked at you like everything you represented held him back. A muscle in Ethan's cheek tightened. He hates what he thinks I am. And what's that? A reminder that he didn't stay, Ethan replied quietly. I stayed for family. He didn't. Nathan considered this, chewing on his lower lip. He seemed the type who dissected people the way engineers dissect circuits, quiet, observant, expecting fault lines where others saw smooth surfaces. Sometimes leaving is just another kind of hiding. The sentence hung between them like a taut wire. Rex lifted his head and sniffed the air. Before Ethan could reply, a soft crunch sounded outside, shoe on frost. Then another. Nathan stiffened instantly, shoulders rising. Rex growled low, body sliding silently into a protective stance, muscles rippling under thick fur. Ethan stood, quiet as a wolf, reflexes locked, senses sharp. He stepped toward the door and flicked off the hanging light. Darkness fell fast, swallowing the room. Only the thin silver moonlight seeping through the window drew faint outlines. Footsteps approached the garage, measured, deliberate. Not Robert. Robert stomped like his thoughts needed volume. This walk was patient, almost scouting. Ethan's voice dropped into a whisper. Get back! Nathan obeyed, slipping behind a shelf stacked with old tins of oil and a rusted tackle box. His breathing turned shallow, almost silent. The kid had instincts, fearful ones, but sharp. A figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted. Broad frame, straight posture, coat hem fluttering slightly in the cold. Ethan stepped forward just enough to reveal himself. "Identify yourself," he commanded, voice quiet but edged like a blade. The man raised his hands slowly, not surrender, but to show no threat. Moonlight brushed his features. Mid-50s. Tall, almost Ethan's height, but leaner, built like someone who lifted more responsibility than weight. Salt and pepper hair cropped regulation short. A thin, neatly trimmed beard traced his jawline, peppered gray. His face bore the kind of fine lines earned by focus, not laughter, eyes sharp, a seasoned observer, a thinker and fighter both. And his coat, long navy wool, lapel pinned with a small gold insignia, U.S. Army crest. Underneath, polished boots, black gloves, every choice neat, efficient, disciplined. "Captain Ethan Hayes?" the man asked, voice deep, steady, not unfriendly but precise. A command voice. Ethan's stomach tightened. He knew that tone. He had answered to it once. "Who's asking?" The man stepped where the moonlight hit him fully. "Major Samuel Price, United States Army Intelligence and Security Command, retired." He reached slowly into his coat and produced identification. Ethan checked the ID. Clean credentials, authentic embossing, old but valid. Major Price's eyes softened just a fraction. "I served with your grandfather, decades ago." Nathan stiffened in the shadows. Ethan held Price's gaze, searching for cracks. "Why are you here?" The major studied Ethan with a solemn kind of respect, the look of a man who had carried messages through war zones, delivered condolences to widows, and stood in shadows most men feared to see. "To make sure you're safe," he said, "and to protect what your grandfather died protecting." Rex's growl dropped off, but his tail stayed rigid. Dogs know sincerity, or danger. Sometimes both live in one man. Ethan didn't lower his guard. "You're late. He's gone." Price's jaw twitched, and for the first time, his posture wavered, just slightly, like grief brushed him across the ribs. "He called me 2 weeks before he passed, said someone else might come after what he kept." "Who?" A faint shadow crossed the major's features. "People who don't represent the flag anymore. Contractors, ghost cells, the kind of men who think national security is a profit margin." In the corner, Nathan swallowed audibly. Ethan processed, blood cooling like steel quenched. "Why warn me now?" Price exhaled, and in the soft sigh Ethan heard a lifetime of burden. Because the minute his heart stopped beating, he paused, voice weighted. His silence ended. Then the major's eyes narrowed, scanning the garage as though his vision could peel back decades. "You opened it." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Price's gaze found the Jeep, the sealed cases, and in that instant a storm churned behind his eyes. Not fear, not shock, but something like dread and reverence mixed. "Dear God," Price murmured. "He really kept it." Nathan stepped from the shadows, voice cracking. "And others know too. They're coming." Major Price didn't react to Nathan's sudden reveal, no surprise, only a slow nod. He had expected shadow watchers. Men like him always did. Then a sound cut through the night, far off but rising. Tires on gravel, headlights sweeping faint across the trees beyond the house. Not one vehicle, 2, maybe 3. Ethan's pulse steadied into battle calm. Rex stood rigid, ears high, tail pointed, body ready. Nathan whispered, trembling but resolute. "They found us." Major Price's eyes hardened into steel. He stepped forward, coat shifting like a flag in wind. "Captain Hayes," he said, voice transforming into command authority. "You need to decide right now if you intend to defend what your grandfather swore to protect." Ethan didn't blink. "I already did." Outside, engines cut, doors opened, footsteps, multiple pairs crunched on gravel. A voice called in the dark, cold and unfamiliar. "House looks quiet. Move in slow." Ethan reached down and rested a hand lightly on Rex's head. The dog leaned forward, teeth barely bared. Nathan clutched the toolbox so tightly his knuckles went white, but he stayed rooted, breathing through fear like someone who finally realized purpose outweighs panic. Major Price pulled back his coat ever so slightly, revealing a worn service pistol holstered at his side. His voice dropped low. "Once you open a sealed chapter of history, you don't get to close it." Ethan stepped toward the garage door, eyes burning with the same fierce resolve that once drove him into gunfire for brothers in arms. "Then let's finish what he started." Footsteps drew near the door. Shadowed figures passed under the moonlight. A hand touched the handle, and the night held its breath. Morning arrived pale and brittle, the first light piercing through a thin veil of fog that clung low to the earth like a secret refusing to lift. Frost glittered across the yard, tiny crystals catching sunlight in 1,000 fleeting sparks. The world felt deceptively peaceful, as if the night had not ended with strangers closing in like wolves circling a quiet farmhouse. Birds stirred in the pines. A deer stepped cautiously near the fence line. A normal morning, almost. Yet Ethan stood at the edge of his property with the posture of a man ready for battle, back straight, jaw locked, every breath steady and controlled. He had not slept. Rex stayed at his heel, tail low, ears sharp, scanning for threats. Inside the garage, Nathan leaned against the wall, eyes red, fingers trembling slightly from adrenaline and exhaustion. Major Price stood near the workbench, crisp even after a sleepless night, coat still immaculate, shoes polished as if it were inspection day. His calm was that of a soldier who had lived too long in shadows and learned to treat danger as old company. Then engines approached, not the stealthy crawl of last night's intruders, but the smooth, authoritative hum of government vehicles. A black SUV turned onto the gravel path, followed by another. They rolled slowly, like predators gauging distance, but the sight of the flags on the plates eased a fraction of tension in Ethan's shoulders. Fraction, not all. War taught him governments could devour their own soldiers just as easily as enemies could. The door opened. Out stepped a man in full formal uniform, a brigadier general, silver-haired, tall, posture rigid but dignified. His face was deeply lined, like life had been carved into him with a knife rather than time. His voice, when he spoke, carried the cadence of authority sharpened by decades of command. "I'm Brigadier General Alan Whitford," he announced, "United States Army." General Whitford's features were striking. Hawk-like nose, sharp cheekbones, a jaw square enough to break steel upon. His eyes, storm gray and deeply set, held that unflinching calm soldiers recognized instantly. A man who had ordered missions knowing men would not return, and carried every ghost with stoic devotion. His silver mustache was trimmed to perfection, adding to his dignified old-guard military air. He looked like the kind of man who grew up in a strict household, joined the service young, and never allowed himself the privilege of regret. He surveyed Ethan with quiet recognition, then looked toward the garage where shadows hid classified history. "Captain Hayes," he said, voice softened just enough to acknowledge respect. "Your grandfather was a patriot beyond measure." Price stepped forward. "General?" His tone held old familiarity. Whitford gave a curt nod. "Major Price. Still meddling in matters that should be left to time, I see." Price's lips twitched in something not quite humor. "Still arriving. Late to the right fights, I see." Nathan blinked between them, clearly trying, and failing, to look invisible. Rex sniffed the air, then sat, tail brushing gravel, watching Whitford like a judge issuing silent verdict. Whitford turned to Ethan. "Colonel Hayes's legacy must be protected, and so must you." Ethan crossed his arms, the posture unyielding. "I don't need protection." "I'm aware of your service record," Whitford replied. "You have survived things most cannot imagine, but this," his gaze drifted toward the garage, "this is a battlefield where loyalty and greed look identical until the first shot." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence acknowledged the truth. Whitford continued, "Your grandfather didn't bury Phantom Echo because it was broken. He buried it because it worked." Nathan exhaled sharply, eyes wide. Price's jaw tightened. Ethan waited. Whitford approached the Jeep slowly, reverently, like it was a monument, not machinery. Phantom Echo could detect hostile transmissions before they were even transmitted. He paused, letting the impossible word settle. Temporal signal anticipation. a theoretical impossibility. Until he made it possible. Nathan whispered, awed, predictive resonance mapping. Whitford looked at him, eyebrow raised. You understand? Nathan swallowed. Theoretically, yes. If you could capture residual echoing frequencies, not through time travel, but through... Whitford cut him off gently. The public cannot comprehend such nuance, which is why this must stay buried. Rex whined low, as if sensing the gravity of choices hanging in the frosty morning air. Whitford studied Ethan again, gaze piercing. Your grandfather refused to sell it to private defense firms. They offered fortunes. He refused to give them a weapon that could manipulate the future. And now? Ethan asked. If the world learns what your grandfather built, Whitford replied, war stops being fought in the present. It will be fought in prediction, in paranoia. Nations will hurt each other not for what was done, but what may be done. Silence weighed heavy. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. A second SUV door opened. A woman stepped out. Early 40s, tall and athletic, ash-blonde hair in a tight bun, sunglasses, pressed navy suit. Her stance, balanced, ready, betrayed tactical training. She carried herself like someone raised by Marines, forged in strict discipline and sculpted by ambition. Her face was sharp, not unkind, but unreadable, with pale green eyes that scanned like a scanner looking for weak points. Agent Olivia Mercer, Defense Intelligence, she said, showing her badge. Her voice was crisp, efficient, each word measured. Ethan immediately recognized the edge, duty over everything, emotions trimmed sharp like a service ribbon. Likely someone who climbed ranks by being better, colder, harder, she stepped toward the men, heels clicking lightly on gravel. Our directive is to ensure this project remains secure and to secure Captain Hayes and any connected personnel. Nathan flinched faintly. Mercer glanced at him, assessing him like a piece of equipment. And you are? Nathan Ellis, he stuttered, pushing glasses up. I was assisting Colonel Hayes. Civilian? Yes. Then keep your distance, Mercer replied. It wasn't cruel, just clinical. She spoke like someone who once trusted the wrong person and never allowed that luxury again. Ethan stepped slightly in front of Nathan. He stays. Shock flickered in Mercer's eyes, like she wasn't used to being contradicted. Price smirked faintly. Whitford's lips tightened into something resembling approval. Mercer adjusted her sunglasses. This location is compromised. You need to leave with us, immediately. And where exactly are we supposed to go? Ethan asked, voice controlled. A secure facility. That tells me nothing. That is the point, she replied. Ethan shook his head. No one moves anything until I know exactly who we're trusting. Mercer opened her mouth to retort, but Whitford raised a hand. Captain Hayes has earned the right to understand. Ethan held Whitford's gaze. My grandfather kept this hidden for a reason. I won't hand it over blindly. Whitford nodded slowly. He would expect nothing less. Rex barked once, a short, sharp alarm. They all turned. Down the road, 3 unfamiliar black vans rolled into view. No flags this time, no government plates, windows tinted too dark, moving too fast. Mercer's hand slid under her jacket. Price stepped closer to Ethan. Nathan's breath hitched. Whitford's jaw set. Too late to debate. The vans slowed, then split. One blocking the road, 2 approaching the yard. Doors cracked open. Figures moved inside, silent, armed, precise. Mercer whispered, "These aren't ours." Ethan's pulse sharpened. Rex bared his teeth. Nathan clutched the workbench to stay standing. Price unbuttoned his coat, revealing his old service pistol. Whitford's voice dropped low, heavy with command. Captain Hayes, protect the Echo. Ethan reached down, resting his palm on Rex's head. Slow, steady, a silent promise. Then the first hostile stepped out of the van, and the standoff began. Dawn had not yet burned the frost from the grass when the 3 black vans split across the road like ink flowing toward the heart of the farm. Ethan felt the old switch flip inside him, the one that traded doubt for duty. He signaled low with 2 fingers. Major Price took the left shadow of the garage's frame, pistol drawn, stance clean and economical as a man who had rehearsed survival into muscle memory. Agent Olivia Mercer moved without wasted motion to the right, jacket lifted just enough to free her sidearm, chin tucked, eyes flicking angles. Her calm wasn't coldness, Ethan realized now. It was grief defanged into discipline. Nathan crouched behind the workbench, hands shaking but eyes bright with focus. That peculiar steadiness of a mind that only stuttered around people, never around problems. Rex's body went taut, tail level, ears forward, one quiet command away from violence or restraint. The first door of the nearest van slid open and a man climbed down in matte black wind gear over soft armor. He had the compact strength of a former operator, short dark beard, close-cropped hair, a mouth set into a practical line that cared for results more than reasons. Two others followed, one lanky with a scar hooked beneath his left eye like a question mark that never found an answer, one heavy-shouldered, his neck tattoo disappearing beneath a collar. None wore patches. Their rifles were held low in that confident way of people who plan to use them. "Captain Hayes," the bearded one called, voice even, hands empty but not harmless. "We're not here to hurt anyone. Step away from the equipment and let's talk." Ethan advanced one measured step, hands away from his body, stance open but rooted. "Then talk." The man smiled with a negotiator's patience. "We represent a private concern safeguarding national interests. The projects inside that garage were improperly retained. We're here to recover them." Mercer's voice cut clean. "Identify your agency." "We don't work for an agency," the man said, smile thinning. "That's the problem with agencies. They forget who they serve." Price edged forward a fraction. "And contractors remember the invoice." The man's eyes flicked to Price, and in that glance Ethan read history. Men like this were everywhere in the long war, talented, burned, rebranded by money. "Clock's ticking," the man said, returning his gaze to Ethan. "You can be compensated, substantially, or this can get messy and the government caravan behind you will help us clean it up to avoid headlines. Either way, the gear leaves." Ethan thought of his grandfather standing in old boots at this very threshold, of a life deliberately small because morality was deliberately large, of a sentence he could still hear. "Honor is the line you never cross even when no one is watching." He shook his head. "No." The man sighed. Disappointment performed like courtesy. "Then let's be efficient." He raised two fingers. The two flanking men shifted toward the side yard to cut angles, just enough aggression to steal control without firing a shot. "Rex," Ethan whispered. The dog moved like lightning, not at the men, but to the low portable generator Nathan had dragged to the garage the night before. "Now," Nathan hissed, finding a courage he hadn't known his body could hold. He snapped a cable, flipped a switch, and the garage shuddered alive with a wash of sound, an ugly, disorienting chorus of layered static and sub-audible tones. Nathan had told Ethan the night before, "We can't fight rifle barrels," but Phantom Echo was built to confound edges. If I pulse the array, it will flood local radios and headsets with phased trash. It won't last long, but it will tilt the field. And it did. The men at the vans flinched, fingers twitching to ears. Their shoulder mics crackled into nonsense. Rangefinders stuttered. The big man cursed softly, eyes watering as the waveform exploited old inner ear injuries. Mercer moved first, 2 quick strides to a woodpile, clean cover, pistol up, voice sharp. "Weapons down!" Price's shot came next, deliberate into gravel in front of the bearded leader, kicking frost and grit against his pants, a border drawn in stone. The man blinked grit away and laughed once, short. "Cute!" Ethan stepped forward. "Leave." "No," the man said, smile gone now, professional courtesy replaced by job. He raised a hand. "End it." The lanky man swept left to flank. Ethan matched him, pivoting to keep himself between the intruders and the garage door. He saw the moment the rifle came up, small, tight movement, knew the angle, knew he couldn't outdraw and didn't try. "Rex!" The shepherd launched low into the man's legs. Perfect K9 textbook. Target the hinge, not the armor. They hit earth, rifle skidding, teeth flashing but not tearing. Rex was trained not to kill unless commanded, to maim the plan, not the man. The heavy-shouldered one lifted his rifle toward the dog, and Mercer put a bullet into the gravel inches from his boot, then another into the front fender of the van. Shock and shrapnel of paint halted his motion, buying beats of breath. Price's voice slammed out. Old authority. Weapons down. You fire on a federal scene and you will not walk away. For a heartbeat, the world balanced like a coin spinning between decisions. The bearded leader understood probabilities. He curled 2 fingers. The heavy-shouldered man stepped back. The lanky one froze beneath Rex's weight, hands open. The leader looked at Ethan, and for the first time, let sincerity show. You think burying that thing protects people? It won't. It'll just give the worst actors a head start. People like me. He tapped his chest. We're the ones who stop what you're too moral to see. Ethan held his eyes. My grandfather saw everything. He just refused to be owned. The leader's mouth tilted. Respect acknowledged constraints. You'll regret this. I can live with regret, Ethan said. I won't live with shame. Sirens, distant, official, growing. Whitford must have called them the second the vans rolled. The bearded man calculated and found no win worth the cost. He signaled retreat with a bored flick, like ending a meeting. The men reboarded. Doors slammed, engines grumbled into reverse disappointment. As they backed out, the leader rolled his window down just enough for one last line. Grief makes saints out of liars, Captain. Ask your government what Phantom Echo really heard. The vans left frost-torn ruts and silence behind. The instant they were gone, Nathan sagged against the workbench and shut the array down, the acoustic fog lifting from the field like a lifted curse. Mercer holstered, exhaling through her nose, then looked at Ethan with something new in her face. Respect given, not borrowed. Price checked the perimeter with an old hunter's caution, then joined them. Whitford strode in from the drive, winter light on his silver hair. You held the line, he said simply, and for a man like him that was a medal. What now? Ethan asked. Whitford looked at the Jeep, the scuffed fender, the paint worn in the shape of boots thrown against it across years. Now we do what Thomas Hayes asked me to do if this day ever came. We end its usefulness without erasing its meaning. The general's gaze found Nathan. Can you neutralize the array permanently without destroying the research record? Nathan swallowed, surprised to be entrusted, then straightened. Yes, with time, I can hard disable the resonance core and archive the schematics for sealed study. Mercer nodded. We'll oversee chain of custody. Captain Hayes, the artifact vehicle can be transferred to an institution under your family's terms. Price glanced at Ethan. Your call. Ethan looked over the garage, at the tools his grandfather had set down in precise lines, at the floor, gouged by decades of wheels, at the place where boyhood first understood that silence could be either mercy or concealment. He thought of Robert's face when greed cracked and shame stepped out of it. He thought of Sarah at the fence line with her careful eyes, who had brought him a key like a prayer. He thought of young soldiers staring at history for proof someone before them had chosen integrity over applause. West Point, he said. Let the Jeep stand where future officers walk by and read his name. Let the tech be sealed and studied for ethics, not weaponized for profit. Whitford extended his hand, and when Ethan took it, he felt how heavy it was to keep a nation honorable. Done. 3 months later, the atrium lights at the United States Military Academy poured warm gold over olive paint and the honest scars of a life spent facing outward. The M151A2 mutt sat on a low plinth, not polished to fantasy, but clean to truth. The placard beneath the bumper carried a name and a line, Colonel Thomas Hayes, who protected freedom in silence. Visitors paused in quiet pockets of reverence, the way people sometimes do in chapels and childhood kitchens. In a side gallery, behind glass, lay the deactivated core of Phantom Echo and a carefully worded ethics statement that never said what it could have done, only why it would not be allowed to try. The Defense Intelligence Archive held the sealed papers. The algorithm lived now as a syllabus for boundaries rather than a blueprint for power. At the dedication, General Whitford spoke briefly, voice rougher than the microphones liked. A nation is strong because someone chooses restraint when victory whispers otherwise. Mercer kept to the edges in a dark suit, hands folded, the guardedness in her finally eased into watchfulness. Major Price wore a tie he plainly hated and laughed once, a dry sound, when Ethan caught him tugging at the knot like it was a faulty sling. Sarah Whitmore came in a neat navy dress and a plain silver locket. Grief had carved her gently, leaving kindness intact. She hugged Ethan with the careful strength of someone who understands that brave people break where no one sees. Robert Hayes stood beside his brother in a charcoal suit that fit better now that ambition had stopped inflating his posture. There was humility in the slope of his shoulders, an ordinary man finally allowed to be ordinary. "I was wrong," he said quietly, eyes wet without shame. "I wanted a ledger to total up a life that didn't need math." Ethan squeezed his shoulder. "Then help me keep the part that does need numbers." And so they did. The Hayes Scholarship for Children of Fallen and Wounded Service. Members opened that year, endowed by the sale of things that could be sold and the surrender of things that could not. In the old garage back home, a small restoration workshop took shape. Workbenches sanded, lights rewired, stains left in wood like rings in a tree. Young veterans came with hands that wanted to build instead of break, learning to hush their ghosts with wrenches and patience. Nathan ran the technical bench, still awkward with people but luminous around circuits, explaining radio guts to teenagers who'd only ever known signals as icons on a phone. Sometimes, late, they'd roll the doors open and sit on the threshold. Ethan, Nathan, Major Price when he visited, Sarah bringing coffee, and watch night breathe. They didn't say the word hero much. They said oil and torque, and you're safe here. One evening, as wind worried the pines and moths danced in the cone of the porch light, Ethan stood in the West Point atrium again for a private moment after closing. Rex leaned warm against his leg, older now in the way a dog blooms into wisdom. Boots whispered on marble as footsteps approached. Robert set a hand on the mutt's fender, palm flat, fingers splayed as if greeting. An altar. He would have hated the attention, Robert said, smiling crookedly. He would have loved the kids who'll read his name, Ethan answered. They fell silent. There are some truths that do not need witnesses, only keepers. Later, at the grave beneath a clean sky, Ethan placed his palm against the stone. His breath fogged, then cleared. He spoke low, so the earth and the man in it could hear. "I kept the line, sir." A breeze took the words and laid them flat like a flag. He felt no triumph, only a rightness that did not require applause. Back home, he hung the old boonie hat above the garage doorway where a boy could see it and ask why. And he would answer, because loud victories are easy to celebrate, but the quiet ones are what keep the world standing. He closed the workshop for the night. Rex's nails ticked softly on concrete. Stars came on one by one like careful promises. And for the first time since the funeral, Ethan slept without dreaming of doors he could not guard. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or blinding light. They come in silence, in the moment someone chooses to do the right thing when no one is watching. God does not always grant us victories that shine. Often, he simply places an old, rusted door in front of us and waits to see whether we have the faith, the conscience, and the courage to open it with a pure heart. In everyday life, we face our own quiet battles, choosing kindness when no one will praise us, standing for truth when others turn away, loving someone without needing to prove anything. Each small act like that is a living prayer, a simple miracle woven into an ordinary day, a gentle whisper from God reminding us he is still here. If this story touched you, share it, so more hearts remember that faith, honor, and compassion still matter in this noisy world. Leave a comment and tell me what you believe in, the miracle you once witnessed, or the prayer you're holding in your heart right now. And don't forget to subscribe so we can continue this journey together, telling stories of courage, sacrifice, and the quiet light of God that lives in ordinary souls. May God bless you and everyone you love, today and always. Amen.